Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on adapting the fighting fantasy rules to Twine games, and in particular, I would like to talk about escaping. So we have a setup that is basically the same as it was in the last video in this series. I have my character details over here. It says you face two skeletons, as it did in the previous video, but it now says something new. It says you may escape at the start of the third combat round, and escape is with a capital letter and in italics. So the reason I've put it in a capital letter and in italics is simply because that's how they do it in the books. They I guess do that to indicate that escape is a sort of term of art. In other words, it's a term in the rules that has a specific definition. So if we continue, we see the two skeletons that we've had in the last few videos. The only difference is it now says combat round 1 in bold. Because we can escape only on the third combat round, and because more generally it's possible to set a specific round after which the player can escape, I thought it would be useful to have the number of the current round so that the player can keep track of sort of where they are if they do want to try and escape. So this works the same as before. We choose an opponent. I wounded one, got wounded by the one that I didn't target. Round 2, I'll got the same guy again. Okay, so we've gotten to round 3, and as promised, we now have the option to escape. Combat round 3, choose which enemy to attack or escape. Not having huge problems with this pair of enemies, so I probably wouldn't choose to escape, but I will do it just to demonstrate how it works. So I'll go one more round. You don't have to escape on the third round. If it says you can escape on the third round, it doesn't mean only the third round. It means the third round or any round after that. So I wound skeleton 1. Because they've only got 2 stamina, there's no point trying to use luck. So if I click there, we now see that they're dead, and the round finishes with an attack from them. And in combat round 4, it says, will you keep fighting or escape? Well, I'll choose to escape, and the way that it works is that you lose 2 stamina per enemy that's still alive. So in this case, I should lose 2 stamina, and indeed if I press escape, yep, my stamina goes down to 14. It says you lose 2 stamina from wounds as you escape, and then it says your adventure continues to indicate that I'm still alive. In a real game, it might be that, in fact it usually would be, that if you escape, you end up somewhere else from where you end up if you win the battle. So for example, let's say I was fighting the 2 skeletons in the example. It might be that if I won, I would go to, well, you look at what they were carrying and you see that they had a wooden staff and you decide to take the wooden staff. So I get an item, perhaps. Whereas if I escaped, of course, I wouldn't get that that benefit. Sometimes I would be in a different place, like if they were guarding a particular path and I escaped, they might say, well, you escaped by running into the trees, and so therefore you're going to have a different encounter to the one you would have if you beat the skeletons and continued along the road, for example. But of course we're only coding combat, so you know, that will have to be left for later. But anyway, that's what it does. So let's see how the code works. Now, this time, there's not a lot of changes to make this happen, so I can show you each individual line. Basically, there's a single new page which deals with escaping, and then there are a few changes on in initialize, who is left, choose enemy, and display enemy. So those four are slightly changed. Escape is a new page, and then all of the other pages are identical, and so we won't be looking at them today. So let's look at initialize. There are two new variables, $RO and $ES. So $RO is the combat round. It starts at 0. You might say, well, shouldn't it start at 1? Shouldn't 1 be the first combat round? Yes, it is. You'll see why in a second. It starts at 0. And then we have $ES. And as the note says here, if ES is 0, then escape isn't allowed in this particular combat. If it's a number over 0, the player can escape at the start of combat round $ES. So if ES was 1, that would mean I could escape straight away. If ES was 4, I have to wait till combat round 4. And of course, as we saw, if $ES is 3, that means I can escape on combat round 3. So we go to who is left. And the first thing that happens is we set $RO++. In other words, we add 1 to its value. That's why it starts at 0, not at 1. We are going to go to this page, who is left, at the start of each combat round. And so, because we visit it once per combat round, it's a good place to increment $RO. So we add 1 to it. The other difference, just to refresh your memories, or to explain it to you if you've come in on this video and haven't seen the earlier ones, this page counts the number of monsters that are left, and in particular, it counts whether there are 0 of them, 1 of them, or more than 1 of them, because it needs to treat them differently. If there's 0 monsters left, well, there's no more fighting to be done, and we just give the player a message saying that they've won. It says your adventure continues. If it's 1 monster, well, this was how it was in the previous video. If there's 1 monster, the player doesn't need to choose which monster to target because there's only 1. So we do that automatically for them. And when we go to the rolling of dice, or if there's more than 1, then they do need to choose which enemy to target. Having escaping makes this slightly different. We split if Z equals 1 into 2 possibilities. Basically, Z equals 1 and escape is not possible, and Z equals 1 and escape is possible. So how do we do that? Well, we have if Z equals 0, give this message, else if Z is equal to 1 and bracket $ES is equal to 0 or $RO is less than $ES, end bracket. So this code in the brackets basically means if escape is not possible. Because if ES is set to 0, that means there's no escape in this battle. And if $RO is less than ES, that means that escape will be possible, but we haven't got to that round yet. So if ES was 3 and $RO was 2, that would mean you can escape in the 3rd combat round, but we're only in combat round 2. So if either of these things are true, then escape is not possible. So if Z is equal to 1 and escape is not possible, then we do what we did before, which was we automatically target the 1 remaining enemy, which is done with that set $T equal to $Y, and we go to PC rolls, which is the one where we roll 2 dice for the player's attack. Now, I will mention there was a thing in here that said set $L equal to 1, because I had this flag that was especially for if there was 1 monster left, but actually I didn't end up using it. I just put it in there and forgot to take it out. So if you're wondering where that went, well, it didn't do anything and I got rid of it. I am using $L, but that's used in luck. But I had a previous one where I was going to have a flag and I was going to have something happen based on that, but it turned out not to be necessary. So the new bit of code really is this bit where, so we have else if Z equals 1 and escape is not possible, and then we just have else if Z is equal to 1. And if that's true, then we know that this bit must be false, because otherwise, Otherwise, if that bit were true and Z were equal to 1, then we wouldn't have got down to here. This code would have activated because both these things would have been true. So if this is the case, there's only one living enemy, but the player has the option to escape. And that means that the player does have a choice, because they have the choice not to fight at all. So we target the last monster that's left. So we set $t equal to $y, because $y is storing the number of the monster, which position the monster has that is still alive. But we set m equal to 6, and we go to display enemy. And that is going to display, that's going to be the situation where we display the enemies and then say, do you want to keep fighting or escape? So let's look at that next. Actually, I just realized at the beginning I said that this one had changed. I was wrong. It hadn't. It's only this one, and this one that have changed. So looking at display enemy, you might remember that $M is what exactly is happening with the display, because there's a few different situations. There's a few different parts in the cycle of a round where we display the enemies. And it's easier to have one page with that code rather than repeating the code each time, having several pages with virtually the same code. And so what we do, because we're going to this page multiple times, we need to have some way of keeping track of which stage are we at. And that's what the $M array is for. So if it's 1, then we're choosing which foe to attack when there's more than one. These are options to do with choosing whether we want to use luck or accept the result of a roll. This one is when there's there's been an exchange of blows but nobody's wounded anyone, either because there was a tie or because we won, where the player character won, but we're talking about a monster that isn't being targeted, in which case nobody gets wounded. 5 is displaying the results of testing luck, and 6, so 5 would be coming from one of these two. And then we have a new one, which is 6, where there's only one foe left, but the player can choose to escape instead. And that tells it to display that. Do you want to keep fighting or escape? So we'll see that next. We'll go to display enemy. Once again, I'm not going to go through all of the code because we have gone through it before. It displays the enemy. It displays them in color if they're still in the fight, and in grayscale if you've reduced their stamina to 0. It shows their skill and stamina if they're still in the fight. If there's multiple enemies that you can choose to attack, it has a button under each living enemy to say, which says attack, and so you can choose which one to attack. But the bit that we are interested in is down here. There's a slight difference. This is once we've displayed the enemy, and now we're displaying some sort of message at the bottom of that. This is the bit we're interested in. So if M is equal to 1, now we can see that it says combat round $RO within, and they're inside bold tags. So that makes it bold. And then it says either choose which enemy to attack, or choose which enemy to attack or escape. In other words, this is if there's no option to escape. And again, it's that if $ES is equal to 0 or $RO is less than ES. We just say choose which enemy to attack. But if escape is possible, we say choose which enemy to attack or escape. And that's a button that leads us to the new page, the escape page. So that's if there's multiple enemies left alive. And then we have else if $M equals 6. It says, again, the combat round 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever it is in bold. And then it has these two buttons. Will you keep fighting or escape? And keep fighting will take us to PC roles, which is the one where we roll, or we'll simulate rolling 2 dice for the player character. And again, we have that option to go to the page escape. And these other options are options we've covered in previous videos, so I won't go through those. And so now, let's say that we have chosen to escape. We have this new page to deal with that. So we set Z equal to 0. This is the stamina lost while escaping. We're going to have to work out how much the player is going to suffer. And it's basically 2 stamina points for every enemy who's still in the fight. So we have a for loop that goes from 1 to $OP. Remember that $OP is the number of opponents. And if $ST square bracket $Y n square bracket is greater than 0, in other words, we look in the array that keeps track of all of the stamina of our enemies, and if this particular foe's stamina is greater than 0, then we set Z plus equal 2, meaning set it to its current value plus 2. So it's 2 stamina per enemy still in the fight. And we end the for loop. Then we set $AT to 1 minus equals Z. In other words, set it equal to its current value minus the number of stamina points that we've worked out we need to lose. And $AT to 1 is our current stamina. 2 that initial 2 indicates stamina. 1 is skill, 2 is stamina, 3 is luck. And this 1 indicates the current value, not the starting and maximum value, which would be 0. So, and that starting or maximum value usually doesn't change. It might change if there's some sort of permanent change, like you're permanently cursed and your maximum stamina goes down. You can never sort of heal if something like that happens. But by default, our current stamina goes down and our maximum and our initial stamina sort of stays where it is. And then we just say you lose Z stamina from wounds as you escape. Then we say, does the player have any stamina left? Is $AT to 1 less than 1? If it is less than 1, your adventure is over. You were very foolish to try and escape. I could have idiot-proofed it. I could have set it up so you don't have the option to escape if escaping is going to kill you. But I decided it was might as well just leave it to the player, and if they're careless, they die. If $AT to 1 is less than 1, your adventure is over. And otherwise, $AT to 1 is 1 or greater, meaning you're still alive. Your adventure continues. So those are the few changes that we need to make to allow the escaping rule to happen. And that is all of the rules that I'm going to encode for now. There are more rules. There are rules that are in specific books or in the role-playing games, in one or other of the 2 role-playing games that were made. But what I've shown you over this series is the rules that are in every book, the sort of core rules, you might say. There are quite a lot of extra rules, like there's a couple of different systems for having spells. So sometimes players can be wizards instead of warriors. Sometimes they're always, in some books, they're automatically wizards. Sometimes there's a choice. You can be a wizard or a warrior. There's sometimes extra attributes that are specific to some books. The role-playing game has social class and skills, but they're not the essentials for making a fighting fantasy. What I've shown you is the essentials. You can't really have a fighting fantasy without escaping and the other things that I've shown you, using luck in battles. Those are the core things that were there from the start, from Warlock of Firetop Mountain, which is the first one in the series. And I, as far as I know, are in all of the others. Certainly they're in all of the others that I've seen. So what I'm going to pursue in future instead is I am going to look at using this code in an actual full game. So how can we have a full game with choices and, random rolls, etc., including having a combat. So we can just set it up and say, right, this one's skill 8, stamina 10, or whatever it is. There's there's one of them and they're a such and such, they use this picture, and then we can just let it go and run the combat. And if the player lives, then they can continue in the adventure. So that's something we'll be doing in future videos. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.